So what do you do when a client comes to you and says, hey, we've got 4 new products launching, we need 4 commercials on them, we can really only shoot them all in one day, and it's due in a few weeks. As a cinematographer or creative, how do you approach this? Hey, I'm Johnny Phillips. I'm a full-time cinematographer for an agency in Atlanta, Georgia called Remedy. A few months ago, we had a client come to us and tell us they had a bunch of products launching at the end of the month, and they wanted to do 4 different commercials on all of these. The catch was that they needed to be in 4 different locations, and they all needed to be shot in one day. If you've worked in our industry, you understand that 4 different locations in one day is kind of a logistical nightmare. Bro. The solution from our agency and our director on this project was to present working inside of a studio with a virtual production volume. I'm really not going to go too far into how this technology works. If you'd like to see more of that, you can check out a YouTube channel called Virtual Production Insider. David's great. He has so many videos that are in depth on virtual production, Unreal Engine, how this technology works. So I want to just dive into one of the commercials we shot out of the 4. Leading up to the shoot, there were lots of meetings between not only me and the gaffer, but me and the set designer and the director, and then at one point all of us sitting in the room together making sure that everybody knew what they were doing, had a plan of attack. If you don't spend that time in pre-production, especially with a shoot like this, you're going to be making a lot of decisions on the day of the shoot that should have already been made. This took about probably 3 to 4 hours of our day shooting this one scene. We were supposed to be inside of a house, so that meant we had flats that were brought in by the set designers and a floor and lots of physical props, lots of things to sort of help blend the virtual production volume. And then outside those flats, we had a 28-foot volume by 10, which you can see in certain shots outside the window. So the director and the client really emphasized to me they wanted the lighting to feel nice, elevated, but not overly stylistic. As a DP, I've really noticed that this has been a big push from clients lately. They don't want the lighting to be so stylized that people automatically associate it as an ad and don't watch the piece. So knowing that, it was kind of a tricky project. I had to sort of balance this natural approach to lighting while also lighting it enough to where it blended with the volume wall. Another challenge of this shoot was that once the actors in these scenes started using the actual product, the director and the client really wanted them to sort of start the process all the way from the beginning to the end. So we really wanted the overall look to look nice. We wanted to allow the talent to play within the space. We did not have the time to make tons of tweaks within each shot. There might have been a few shots where it was a close-up on the talent's face. I would say, hey, like, can we pause for just a moment, bring in like a nice little frame or some neg and beautify this shot just a little bit more. You really have to make sure that the wide shot looks super nice because that's what you're going to be seeing for most of the scene. So this is an overhead that me and the gaffer put together the week before the shoot. Our camera's here, talent's here. This is the inside, an L-shaped studded wall room. We've got one window, and this is the only window in the scene, so you always want to be looking for ways to find a way to motivate your lighting. Obviously for us on this one, you see a window within the scene, and so that's probably one of the better ways to motivate your key light. So after the gaffer and I talked extensively, our hope was to sort of try to replicate some nice hard sunlight coming through this window here. We had a 1200D, which ended up not being enough, so I think it was like a 1200D and a 600D. We fired this into, I think, a massive 4x4 mirror, which then would fire the light inside. What's great about the mirror is not only does it basically double the distance that your light is coming from, it also gives you more realistic shadows than just like firing the light directly at talent. Not only were we getting this natural daylight coming through the window, the walls inside our scene were sort of a little bit gray white. They would naturally give a nice bounce to our talent. We also had a 1200 by going through a 12 by 12, and that was really just to help like give some ambient level and push to the room. We also had 20 by overhead that we would cut on at maybe like 1%. Again, just very subtly having a little bit of ambient push into the room. When there is no motivation for lighting coming from above, you never want it to jump out to the viewer that, hey, there's a light above their head, and pushing for that natural look as much as we can. The last thing that was really sort of helping wrap the light on our talent was a Amaran F22C that was boomed up and over the side of the wall. Yes, in this shot you can kind of see it a little bit, which the nature of these shoots, and so sometimes you just miss things. Now that I've like briefly touched on the lighting setup and some of the logistics of the day, I want to just touch on a couple of the creative decisions that we made for this shoot. The client and the director had really emphasized realism and naturalism. They don't feel over polished, over stylized. They don't feel like there's 10 people sitting behind a camera that's making every single decision and has spent weeks of their lives planning this and making sure that it doesn't epically fail and that the client never hires us again. So to try to help accomplish what the director and the client were requesting, I suggested that we used wider lenses on a lot of these scenes as much as we could. Often I would try to pick like a 16mm or a 24mm and get as close as I could to the talent, which of course tends to show a little bit more of the scene, establishes the landscape or the environment that your talent's in, really helps to make the viewer like really feel connected to what talent was doing and the process that they were going through. It's something you definitely want to plan for in pre-production. You want to know that you're going to be shooting wide. If you had shot a lot of this on longer lenses, which we did shoot some long lens stuff, it often feels very compressed and tight, and that's not really what we wanted. Another creative decision that we made was to do a lot of POV shots. We wanted to mount our camera to a lot of the things the talent was using in this scene. So there was a lot of planning that went into this when the director and I walked through every single thing that the talent would be picking up or moving or changing. That could be really fun inserts to make the viewer feel even more connected with the product. One of the issues with doing mounted shots is sometimes they can take a while to put together. You're often using a smaller camera like an FX3 and then mounting it with a couple gobo heads and some Cartolinis, and that can often take some time. And we really didn't have that much time. The solution that we came up with was to use an iPhone, and I was actually pretty skeptical of this idea at first. So we did a lot of research on what was the best way to shoot with the iPhone, and we came across the Blackmagic app, which is actually free, and it allows you to shoot flat, and it allows you to shoot in RAW. It gives you pretty much all the traditional features and settings that an actual camera would give you. The iPhone was very light and small, so we could mount it to these tools, to pencils, to the talent. Kind of just opens up the doors for creativity for shots that you probably could not get with a traditional POV rig, or just would take so much time. You would be insanely behind. So that really wraps that up today. This is the first video I've ever done. If it was completely terrible and you didn't learn anything, great. If you did learn something, let me know. Let me know what could be better next time. If you want to see more in depth on the lighting setups, more in depth on working in virtual production, yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Later.